Friends, before we dive deeper down the rabbit hole and begin to dismantle the mechanisms that govern your reality, I ask you to do one simple but important thing. Right now, subscribe to the channel and like this video. This is the only way to signal the algorithms and help spread this information to those who are still sleeping. Done? Thank you. Now let's start with the foundation. Chapter 1. We live in a world where the concept of freedom has been replaced by the concept of assortment. You enter a huge shopping mall or scroll through endless pages of marketplaces, and it seems to you that you have an unlimited choice. Thousands of brands, hundreds of smartphone models, dozens of types of cars. But this is not choice. This is a carefully orchestrated illusion. True freedom is not the ability to choose between red and blue packaging, but the ability not to participate in the transaction at all. However, it is precisely this option that the system diligently erases from your consciousness. From early childhood, each of us signs an invisible, hidden contract with society. Its terms are simple but cruel. You are obliged to be a productive element of the economy. The scenario is pre-written. Get an education, find a job, take out a mortgage, buy a car on credit, and spend all your earnings on maintaining your status. We have been led to believe that happiness is an external attribute, that success is measured by inches of screen diagonal or a brand on clothing. This is the consumption matrix. It works flawlessly as long as you believe that the next purchase will finally fill that inner void, which is actually created by the lifestyle itself. The system relies on your dissatisfaction. It is vital for it that you feel incomplete without a new gadget or a fashionable accessory. Why is financial freedom so dangerous for this construct? Because a financially independent person is a critical bug in the program. This is a virus in the operating system of the global economy. When you have capital that covers your basic needs and passive income that exceeds your expenses, you suddenly acquire a superpower that corporations and governments fear. You get the right to say no. You stop fearing dismissal, which means you cannot be manipulated through the fear of hunger. You stop taking consumer loans, on the needles of which the entire banking system rests. You stop buying unnecessary junk to drown out the stress of an unloved job, because you no longer have an unloved job. For an economy built on a model of endless GDP growth, such a person is a direct threat. Imagine for a second what would happen if millions of people woke up tomorrow and realized that they have enough of what they already possess. Markets would collapse, stocks of giants would depreciate, tax revenues would dry up. This entire colossus with feet of clay rests solely on your dependence on your salary and your desire to spend that salary down to the last cent. Financial freedom is dangerous because it transforms an obedient consumer into an observer who stands outside the game. You step out of the rat race and begin to see that the walls of the maze are just scenery. And that is why the path to financial independence is so complex and non-obvious. It is not profitable for the system to let you go free. It needs your resources, your time, and your life converted into corporate profit. Chapter 2. The Evolution of Chains. How Credit Scores Replaced Shackles. The history of humankind is not just a chronicle of wars and discoveries. It is a history of perfecting methods of control. If we look back, we will see that old forms of coercion were monstrously inefficient. Slavery, based on physical force, required enormous resources: overseers, guards, weapons, and walls. A slave held by force works poorly. He lacks motivation, and a spark of rebellion always smolders in his heart. The system needed evolution. It required a mechanism that would make a person voluntarily put on shackles, and moreover, make him proud of their shine and weight. Thus, a sophisticated financial architecture replaced crude iron. We moved from physically owning people to owning their time and future, and debt became the main instrument of this transition. In the modern world, a credit score is not just dry statistics of your solvency. It is your social passport, your mark of loyalty, and, in essence, the length of your chain. Think about how ingeniously this trap is set. Work is not forced upon you. You are sold a dream. A beautiful house, a prestigious car, the latest smartphone, these are all attributes of a successful life that the system graciously offers you to get here and now. You just need to sign. At this moment, an invisible transformation occurs. You cease to be a free agent of the economy and become its hostage. A high credit score, which millions of people are so proud of, in the language of the system, means only one thing: This person is an ideal performer. He is predictable. He is manageable. He is safe. A person with a 30-year mortgage will not go on strike. He will not slam the boss's office door if he is humiliated. He will not dare to drop everything and leave to find his true calling, because every month, like a sword of Damocles, the payment date hangs over him. The fear of losing the income source necessary to service the debt has become a new whip, which hurts far more than a real lash, because this fear lives in your head. The system has replaced external overseers with your internal censor. You push yourself, you limit yourself, and you discipline yourself to stay within the boundaries outlined by your credit limit. The debt trap has become comfortable, furnished with appliances and furniture, but it remains a pit from which it is extremely difficult to escape. Financial obligations bind hands more reliably than any ropes, depriving a person of the main resource, the right to risk. And without the right to risk, without the ability to stop and rethink your path, freedom becomes a fiction. We think we are buying things, but in reality, we are selling our lives on installment, month after month, year after year, ensuring the stability of the very system that gave us this credit of trust. Think for a second about the paradox that we take for granted. We spend 10 to 15 years of our lives in educational institutions. We cram the structure of a single-celled organism, calculate integrals that we will never need, and memorize dates of historical battles. But in all these thousands of hours, no teacher, no professor explains to us the nature of money. We are not told how the banking system works, what compound interest is, how to read financial statements, or how to protect our savings from inflation. Many consider this an unfortunate oversight or an outdated curriculum, but let's face the truth. This is not an error. This is not a bug. This is a feature. The modern education system, whose roots go back to the 18th century Prussian model, was not created to raise thinkers, entrepreneurs, or financially free people. In the era of industrialization, the elite and capital owners didn't need competitors. They needed executive workers for factories and the bureaucratic apparatus. Look closely at a school. It is built like a factory itself. The bell signifying the start of a shift, rows of desks resembling an assembly line, strict obedience to authority, the need to raise your hand to get a voice, and standardized tests that screen out any non-standard approach. This system brilliantly fulfills its true purpose, the mass production of hired employees. The main skill that school instills is the ability to follow orders and work within the system for rewards in the form of grades, which in adult life turn into a salary.
But the most terrible crime of academic education against your financial intelligence lies deeper, in the very psychology of learning. School teaches us to be terrified of mistakes. In the classroom, a mistake is a disaster. It means red ink in your notebook, a bad grade, a teacher's disapproval, and peers' ridicule. We are conditioned to believe that there is only one correct answer, and it is already known to someone else. This fear of making mistakes is the main blocker of financial success. In the real world of business and investments, it's impossible to succeed without making mistakes. Entrepreneurs learn precisely through failures, through losing money and making wrong decisions. But an honor student is paralyzed by the fear of making a wrong move. He chooses what he perceives as a safe job as an employee, because there the responsibility is minimal and the rules of the game are clear. Furthermore, education deliberately shifts the focus from asset creation to narrow specialization. We are told, study well to find a good job. Notice, not to create a business, not to invest, but specifically to find a job. We are taught to be cogs, narrow specialists, lawyers, engineers, managers. The narrower the specialization, the more dependent a person is on the system. A narrow specialist cannot survive without an employer who provides him with a workplace. A financially literate person, on the contrary, is a generalist. He understands how systems work as a whole and hires specialists to achieve his goals. As a result, we get millions of smart, educated people who are completely financially illiterate. They can calculate the trajectory of a rocket, but they cannot balance their own budget. They fall into the credit trap because they don't understand the difference between good and bad debt. They work all their lives for money instead of making money work for them, simply because they were never told that the second option was even possible. The education system releases into the world ideal consumers and obedient taxpayers who are too busy surviving from paycheck to paycheck to raise their heads and ask questions about how economic reality is truly structured. And as long as you believe that a diploma is your ticket to wealth, the system calmly continues to use your labor to enrich those who create the rules of this game. Chapter 4. The Inflationary Needle. a mathematical mechanism for stealing your time. Most people perceive inflation as a natural weather phenomenon. Prices rise, life becomes more expensive, and it seems to be just an inevitable side effect of economic development. But if we look at the financial system as an engineering construct, we will see that inflation is not an error and not an accident. It is a functional feature. It is a mechanism built into the system's code, whose task is to prevent you from accumulating enough resources to exit the game. Let's break down the mathematics of this process, discarding complex economic terms. Money, in its essence, is the preserved energy of your labor. It is your time, converted into a universal equivalent. When you work 40 hours a week, you exchange hours of your life for numbers on a bank account, hoping to spend them in the future. You believe that these numbers will retain the value of your time. But here, the printing press comes into play. When central banks increase the money supply, they do not create new goods, factories, or technologies. They simply increase the number of coupons for obtaining the same goods. Imagine diluting expensive wine with water. There's more liquid, but less taste and strength. The same thing happens with your savings. Every new printed banknote steals a microscopic fraction of purchasing power from every banknote already in your wallet. This is the theft of time.
If you worked 10 years to save for a house, and during those 10 years, inflation devalued your savings by half, it means that the system effectively nullified 5 years of your life. You went to work, got tired, spent your nerves, but the result of that labor was expropriated through the inflation tax. This is a brilliant scheme because it is invisible. No one comes to your home to take half your furniture, but mathematically, the result is the same. The system of financial unfreedom rests on the fear that money will run out. Inflation ensures that this fear will be eternal. It forces you to run faster just to stay in place. In the last century, one working person could support a family and buy a house in a few years. Today, 2 working adults struggle to pay off a 30-year mortgage. Do you think houses have become so much better? No, it's just that your money has become so much weaker. This mechanism creates dependence. You cannot simply accumulate capital and stop, because capital melts away. Inflation forces you to invest, to take risks, to put money back into the system, to buy stocks or real estate whose prices are inflated by the same printing press. You are deprived of the right to passively preserve energy. You are not allowed to simply be. You are obligated to participate in the race. Why is this important for the system's stability? Because a financially free person is uncontrollable. If money appreciated over time, that is, if we had deflation, you could work intensively for 10 years, save your earnings, and retire, pursuing creativity or self-development. But the system doesn't need philosophers and creators. It needs cogs. Inflation ensures that the cog will turn until it wears out, because stopping means poverty. We live in an era where saving money has become a mathematically unprofitable activity. Bank deposits offer interest rates that rarely cover real, not official, inflation. This means that by trying to preserve your earnings, you are still slowly bleeding financially. Understanding this mechanism is the first step toward awakening. You must realize that prices are not rising, money is falling. Every time you see a new price tag in a store, know this: it's not that the product has become more expensive, it's that your life energy, sealed in currency, has been diluted to save the debts of states and corporations. The inflationary needle is a way to keep you in a state of chronic resource scarcity so that you continue to sell your time again and again indefinitely. We often think that poverty is simply the absence of money, a dry mathematical error in the budget. But in reality, and the architects of the current system understand this perfectly, poverty is primarily a deep neurobiological state known as scarcity psychology. When a person is in survival mode, their cognitive bandwidth physically decreases. This is called the tunnel effect. All your mental resources, all your brain's working memory are consumed by solving immediate problems. How to pay the mortgage, how to get the kids ready for school, how to make it to the next paycheck. In such a state, a person loses the biological ability to plan strategically. They cannot think in terms of decades. They are forced to think in hours and days. And it is precisely this mechanism that is the main fuel for the modern economic machine. Fear is the most effective and cheapest manager in human history. If you remove the existential dread of poverty, who would voluntarily agree to perform monotonous, health-destroying work for minimal pay? The system vitally needs you to balance on the edge, to always have slightly fewer resources than you need for complete peace of mind and autonomy. This state of permanent anxiety keeps you on your toes, forces you to run faster, agree to overtime, and most ironically, spend money you don't have on things you don't need, just to get a short-term dopamine hit and suppress stress.
By the way,
In a world where your attention is constantly being stolen and monetized, the ability to filter information is the first step towards real freedom. If you feel that this analysis helps you see the hidden mechanisms of reality, make a small but important investment right now. Subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. This is not just support, it's your signal to the algorithms that you choose awareness and hard truth instead of mindless entertainment. Returning to scarcity psychology, we see the main threat to the established order. The danger of financial freedom to the system lies not in your ceasing to work, but in your tunnel vision disappearing. When capital provides security, cortisol levels drop, and a person regains the ability to see the bigger picture. They suddenly realize that many social contracts and rules they followed all their lives were imposed solely to make them a convenient resource. A financially independent person stops fearing dismissal, which means they stop being obedient. They begin to ask uncomfortable questions about the meaning of activity, about ethics and the fair distribution of goods, questions whose answers are too expensive for corporations. Therefore, consumer culture aggressively imposes an artificial scarcity on us. Even if you are objectively wealthy, you are made to believe that it's not enough, that your model of success is outdated. The system's task is to maintain a phantom pain of inadequacy in you so that you never stop, never breathe out, and never start thinking for yourself, because a thinking resource is a defect in the production system. Chapter 6: The Uncontrollable Element: Why the System Fears Your Autonomy. Let's face it, the ideal citizen for any established economic structure is a person in a state of mild but constant anxiety. They must fear losing their job, worry about the next mortgage payment, and constantly desire things they cannot yet afford. It is this background anxiety that keeps the gears of the enormous mechanism turning. It forces people to agree to unpaid overtime, tolerate arbitrary bosses, and remain silent when conscience demands speaking out. The fear of poverty is the most effective manager in human history. But what happens when you achieve financial freedom? You become an uncontrollable element, a technical glitch, an anomaly in an equation designed for obedience. The first thing that disappears with financial dependence is leverage. A corporation, bank, or even the state no longer has a gun to your head in the form of a threat of hunger or losing your home. A person who doesn't need a salary to physically survive the next month is virtually impossible to manipulate. They cannot be ordered to do something against their principles under threat of dismissal. They will simply stand up, smile, and leave. And this simple gesture of refusal is the most terrifying sight for a system built on hierarchy and submission. An autonomous person is also dangerous because they drop out of the imposed consumption race. When you have capital working through you and inner confidence, you no longer need to buy expensive status symbols to prove your worth to society. A financially free person rarely buys a new phone model on credit or a luxury car with their last money to impress colleagues they don't even like. You cease to be an effective battery for an economy based on endless sales growth. For the marketing departments of giant corporations, you become invisible, a dead zone, a black hole where advertising budgets disappear without yielding results. If everyone became financially independent, the modern model of the consumer economy would collapse in one quarter. Moreover, financial freedom gives you the most scarce and dangerous resource of modernity: time for reflection. A person busy surviving from 9 to 6 and then stuck in traffic jams physically has no time to deeply analyze politics, economics, or social processes.
They only have enough energy left to mindlessly consume light entertainment content in the evening. This is mental anesthesia. But a free person begins to ask questions, uncomfortable questions. They begin to see cause and effect relationships that were previously hidden behind the fog of fatigue. They begin to teach their children not how to be obedient performers, but how to be owners and creators. The system fears your autonomy not because it possesses malicious intent, but because any system strives for stability and predictability. Bureaucracy and corporate algorithms demand standardization. You must be an understandable unit of statistics, a predictable consumer, and a taxpayer. When you achieve financial sovereignty, you reclaim your right to complete self-determination. You become a subject, not an object. You become the one who creates the rules, not merely the one who follows them. And the most important thing the system fears is the contagiousness of your example. One free person surrounded by dependence is an irritating factor, but also a beacon. Looking at your calm confidence, your ability to say no, those around you begin to realize that their cage is not locked, that the bars of this cage consist only of their own financial obligations, which can be closed. If a critical mass of people achieves such autonomy, the very architecture of the current social pyramid will begin to crumble. After all,
Who will meekly turn a heavy wheel for a bowl of rice if everyone understands that they can leave the cage and build their own engine? This is precisely why the path to true freedom is never advertised on billboards. The system needs cogs, not engineers of their own destiny. Chapter 7. The New Ethics of Control, CBDC, and the Death of Cash. We are approaching a point of no return, where the very concept of private property is transforming into a conditional permission to consume. If previous forms of financial control were restrictive, then the introduction of central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, changes the very physics of money. Many mistakenly believe that CBDC is just another form of cashless payment, which we are used to when paying with a card or smartphone. This is a dangerous misconception. Modern cashless money is a commercial bank's obligation to you. A central bank digital currency is a direct channel between the state and your wallet, bypassing intermediaries. But the main difference is not in architecture, but in functionality. CBDC is programmable money. Consider the meaning of this term. Programmability means that an algorithm for its use can be embedded in every digital ruble, dollar, or euro. Today, your cash is neutral. A banknote in your pocket doesn't know who you are. It has no memory and no morals. You can buy bread with it, donate to charity, or make an anonymous purchase that no one will know about. For the system, this anonymity is a critical vulnerability, a blind spot in their database. Cash is the last bastion of financial privacy, and that is why a systematic war is being waged for its destruction. With the introduction of CBDC, the system gains an instrument of absolute control that dictators of the past could not even dream of. Imagine a situation of economic downturn. To stimulate consumption, the central bank can introduce so-called expiring money. If you don't spend your funds by the end of the month, they will simply burn away. Capital accumulation, which is the foundation of financial independence, will become technically impossible for most of the population. You will be forced to live day to day, constantly turning the wheel of the economy. But the control goes deeper. Since every transaction is tracked in real time, money can be restricted by its intended use. This is no longer fantasy, but a technical reality. Smart contracts can prohibit you from buying plane tickets if you exceed your personal carbon footprint limit.
They can block the purchase of sugar or alcohol if the healthcare system decides it's harmful to your body. Or, even more terrifying, your wallet might be disabled within a certain radius of a political rally location. Financial freedom is dangerous for the system because it provides a resource for dissent. CBDC eliminates this danger preventatively. In a world where digital currency has triumphed, there's no need to send police to freeze the accounts of the opposition or an undesirable business. A single line of code is enough to exclude a person from the economy. You don't just lose access to your money, you discover that this money was never truly yours. They were vouchers issued by the system, whose validity could be revoked at any second. The death of cash is presented under the guise of convenience, fighting the shadow economy and terrorism. We are promised instant transactions and no fees. But the price of this convenience is the creation of a digital panopticon. In this new ethics of control, there is no place for the presumption of innocence. Every one of your expenses, every habit, every movement becomes transparent, and most importantly, externally controllable. If cash is freedom of the press, then CBDC is censorship at the ink level. And once physical money definitively disappears from circulation, the trap will snap shut. Exiting the system will become impossible, because beyond the digital perimeter, there will be no means of survival. Chapter 8. Traps for Escapees. The Successful Success Industry as a Distraction Maneuver. The system is too clever to simply forbid you from dreaming of freedom. Direct prohibitions cause revolts, while the illusion of opportunities generates obedience. When you finally wake up and realize that the study, work, buy on credit, die scenario doesn't suit you, you start looking for a way out. And it is here, on the very threshold of awakening, that the most cunning trap awaits you, the successful success industry. This is a brilliant distraction maneuver. As soon as you type into a search engine how to become financially independent, algorithms don't offer you boring accounting books, long-term investment strategies, or the philosophy of Stoicism. No, they unleash an avalanche of vivid images, rented supercars, stacks of banknotes, views of Dubai skyscrapers, and endless promises of easy money. They are not selling you freedom. They are selling you the aesthetic of consumption, elevated to an absolute. The danger of this trap lies in the substitution of concepts. Financial freedom is, in essence, the ability not to think about money.
It is autonomy from external circumstances and the absence of the need to sell your time. But successful success replaces autonomy with hyperactivity. You are told that to be free means to work 24/7, constantly hustle, be at peak productivity, and most importantly, ostentatiously spend your earnings to prove your status to others. Instead of getting out of the rat race, a person simply switches to a faster and more expensive wheel. Info gypsies and motivation gurus convince you that to exit the system, you need even more money than to live within it. They monetize your desire to escape. You pay the system for courses on how to cheat the system. It's a perfect vicious circle. Think about why social networks encourage content displaying luxury, but de-emphasize content about modesty and capital accumulation. Because a person who strives for external attributes of success remains an ideal cog in the economic machine. He earns a lot, but spends even more. He is still dependent. He cannot stop because his status requires constant fueling. His freedom is merely a golden chain that weighs even more than an iron one. True financial freedom often looks boring. It's an old sweater, no debts, a diversified portfolio, and the ability to walk in the park on a Wednesday morning without answering to anyone. But such an image cannot be sold.
You can't build a wish marathon on it. Therefore, the system slips you a fake. It directs your revolutionary energy, your desire for change, into a channel safe for itself, into an endless race for attributes that you actually don't need. The success industry creates a cult of unrealistic expectations. When you try to replicate the path of a survivor who made millions in cryptocurrency in a week and fail, you blame yourself. You think you didn't try hard enough, didn't meditate enough, or bought the wrong course. This generates guilt and forces you to work even harder, plunging even deeper into the matrix. This is the main trick. To make a rebel who wants to leave prison voluntarily build themselves a VIP cell, believing that this is the palace of freedom. As long as you chase an image from someone else's profile, you are not building real assets. You are not creating a safety cushion. You are not gaining control. You are simply burning your resources, feeding the very machine you wanted to disconnect from. A real escape is made in silence, not under camera flashes. Chapter 9. The Gray Man Strategy. True Freedom in an Era of Total Surveillance. We have arrived at the final and perhaps most important part of our discussion. If the previous chapters explained how the system tries to control you through debts, inflation, and social obligations, now we will talk about how to become invulnerable to this system. In a world where your every step, every transaction, and every click is recorded, true financial freedom requires not loud success, but quiet invisibility. This is a concept known in special services as the gray man. Applied to finance, it is the art of possessing resources, but not attracting the attention of algorithms and tax structures beyond the necessary minimum. The system hates emptiness and anonymity. It needs to know how much you earn, where you spend it, and most importantly, where you store it, so that it can seize or freeze it at any moment. The gray man strategy is a conscious refusal of conspicuous consumption. When you buy expensive things for show, you're not just gratifying your ego, you're sending a signal to the system. I'm here, I have surpluses, I can be milked. True freedom lies in having your assets securely protected and, if possible, decentralized. This is owning something that cannot be taken away with a single click in a banking application. It's about intelligently distributing capital across different jurisdictions, using physical gold, cash, and of course, cryptocurrencies on cold wallets. These are assets that belong to you mathematically and physically, not legally by permission of a bank. Being a gray man means blending into the crowd while maintaining complete control over your life. It's when you look like an ordinary passerby, but possess a sovereignty inaccessible to most. You don't depend on a credit manager's approval, you're not afraid of an account freeze, because your capital isn't in one basket. You become a nightmare for the system, not because you break the law, but because you cease to be a cog that can be easily replaced or broken. You step out of the rat race not to stand on a pedestal under the spotlights, but to retreat into the shadows where peace and security reign. Financial freedom is dangerous for the system precisely because it transforms an obedient debtor to an autonomous subject. And if you've watched up to this point, it means you've already started this transformation process. You now know how the mechanisms of control work, and you have a map to exit the labyrinth. Remember that your freedom is your personal responsibility. No one will bring it to you on a silver platter, as it is unprofitable for the system. But now you have knowledge, and knowledge is the only currency that is not subject to inflation. With this, we conclude our series.
If you want to continue receiving tools for hacking reality and achieving true independence, hit the subscribe button right now. It's not just a click, it's your voice against the system of ignorance. Be sure to like this video so that YouTube algorithms are forced to show this truth to as many people as possible. Leave a comment about what you think of the gray man strategy. Act while you still have time. See you in the next videos.